Right, let's go. Here we go. It's live, another Survivor Worldwide episode on Reality Pop. For those that are watching the video content, you would notice that it's a slightly different thing that we're doing here. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we got there in the end and we moved over to Zoom for this specific interview. I've got the latest evicted castaway from Survivor South Africa Immunity Island, Dino Paulo. Dino, how are you?
Well, thanks, man. And firstly, thanks so much for having me. As you know, I watch your podcast and I love your content. So it's super cool to finally be here chatting to you. Wish it was a little bit later down the line, like a lot later down the line, but it's super rad nonetheless. So thanks for having me.
No, exactly. I mean, you probably would know this as someone that's watched the show, had you really high. I believe my co-host Riley picked you as his first pick. He had you as the winner pick, and he was like adamant throughout the season. Dino's definitely going to win it. So he definitely had your back. And I will admit, if he didn't pick you, it was very close between you and Chappies for that first spot for me as well. I was like, oh, who am I going to pick for this first person here? So you had a lot of love coming into this season. A lot of people in the preseason rated you extremely highly. What was this experience like as a fan coming into the show and getting so much love from the community before you even started?
Oh, dude, it was so awesome. I feel like the biggest con artist in the world. I wish I could have conned the people in the game the way I did, like the public outside of the game.
Yeah.
It was initially I was like, oh no, I'm getting this like love. There's this weight of expectation. And I was like, you know what, lean into it, like enjoy it, make the most of it. I always said that I wanted people to feel something if I left the game, whether they were happy that I went home or sad that I went home. I just didn't want people to feel indifferent. So when I did get this love pre-game, I was like, it was super cool, man. It was so unexpected as well, with how far wide and far reaching and to see people like hold me as like this potential candidate to do well. It was humbling to say the least. So yeah, it was definitely a special part of my short-ish Survivor journey, and I'm very grateful for it.
Well, I guess a lot of it came down to some of the early season content. You know, you obviously were very active on social media, Twitter, and all these different things as well.
Yeah.
And people sort of latch on to these little things. Oh, he looks like he really enjoyed his time. He must be doing quite well in the season. But
Yeah.
one of the things that stood out for me in your interviews was that you spoke about other survivors that you had conversations with before you went out there and actually played the show. Was there any of those survivors specifically that said something that actually, you know, stood out to you and something that you could share that maybe other people would sort of latch onto and could help them in the game in the future? Who sort of stood out for you and what type of advice that they give to you going into the season?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, and geez, what a privilege to have had those conversations before going into the game. You know, as one as a fan, and two as a castaway going into the game. So, I mean, I had a good breakfast with Jacques about a week before I left, and we had a good chat. And I love the way he did it. In which way he didn't say go out and play the game like this and do this, because you know nobody must play your experience for you. You need to go out there and play your own game. You know. There's a million different ways to win this game, and that's why it's so amazing, right? There's no right or wrong way. There's no blueprint. So I really appreciated the way Jacques came across, and we just had like this general conversation about Survivor, and it was just more like mates chatting over like something that they love, you know. So I appreciated that, and it put my mind at ease, and that was lots of fun, you know. I had a lekker Zoom chat with old Adam Klein. He was so much fun, and I love him to bits, you know. He was this chaotic, messy winner, and I was, you know, I love chaos and mess clearly. So, what he said to me that stuck with me heavily, and I think is solid advice is like you don't have to be the power center, you don't have to be the person that is seen to be controlling everything and is controlling everything, no matter how subtle or unsubtly it is. You know, he's like find that person and align with them, because if you're close to them, you'll be protected. You know, if you're in that inner circle and they've got the control, early on in the game in particular, he's like that will see you through the first couple of days until you build all the relationships you need. And I thought that was solid advice. And it was great advice, and it was something I did try and apply, but unfortunately my reputation preceded me, you know. The other thing was Luke Toki. I mean, we know what his journeys were like in both of his seasons, and he said to me, he's like, you know, you need to find that person early on that you align with and you stick with, and that's your ride or die, you know. And I value that. And I mean, if you look at both his journeys, I mean, there's a lot to be said about that. And if you look at a lot of castaways and Survivor seasons in the past, you know, having that number one ally, whether they're visible or less visible, so important in the game. And it was just something that again, I think it was because of my reputation. Excuse me. I think it was just something that I just struggled to get right. And good advice wasted on on me. But yeah.
Yeah, so I guess let's start in the beginning, right? Let's go to day one. You get on the beach, you see Nico there. He throws a little bit of a twist out there for you guys and saying that there's some individual immunity that's going to be at stake within that first challenge. And, in your mind, you're thinking, I'm gunning for this. I'm going to go get it. Obviously it makes sense. Day one, you want to try and stay safe. What was the fallout like within Tribe when you went back with that immunity? Were they jealous of the fact that you had it? What was that like in the early stages?
I don't regret it for a second, because I knew a couple of people had recognized me, and I was worried that I'd be thrown under the bus and have a target put on my back. So the decision for me to go for that necklace was a no-brainer, and I don't regret that for a second. It just added to all the paranoia around me, so getting back to the tribe and just going, hey guys, I got this thing, blah blah blah, tongue in cheek, like let's move on with our lives. I'm open, transparent. Anything that came out about me as being a super fan, this was evidence of those claims. This necklace was like validation to any throwing under the bus that was happening. So it did make that a little bit worse, but that was always going to happen for me. So I still readily accept that the upside of that necklace outweighed the downside for me, particularly at that point in game. I think there was a bit of like jealousy. I mean, Sean passed a remark about the necklace. Oh yeah, well, why don't you just give it to me? And I was like, no, so I think there could have been underlying like tones of jealousy there. I'm just speculating as possibly. So I mean, it might have struck something inside one or two people, but I'm not too sure of that, so I can't really comment.
Now, you kind of alluded to the fact that some people recognized you when you went out there onto the beach. And I found out in the preseason that you won in Survivor Online Orc game. Was it through that people knew who you were, or was it through just being a big fan and going to Survivor events and things like that in South Africa, where some of the fans kind of get to know each other a little bit, or they may have seen each other at certain events? Can you speak to that a little bit? And who were those people that sort of recognized you early on?
So the big obvious one was Jason, because last year or the previous season, both our season 7 auditions got a lot of views on YouTube. Like a couple of thousand views each. We were probably the most two viewed audition videos, so we were very aware of each other in the survival world, and anybody who was preparing to be on the show could easily pull up those audition videos, and we'd be like top of the list and see us. And then Jason and I both have a mutual friend in Tony from season 6. So we knew of each other. We never crossed paths. We didn't ever hang out to chat, but we knew each other well enough, and we knew of each other's like journeys and being massive super fans. So that was the big one for me. And then winning that org. I mean, Jason knew that because Tony actually hosted or co-hosted the org. Which I loved, and I still actually don't regret, even though there were crappy repercussions. It was just so much fun. So Jason was well aware that I had won that org. So he used all of that against me within like 15 minutes of being on that beach.
Yeah. So I was wondering, with that sort of being used against you, was there any opportunity to use that to your sort of strength and go and talk to Jason and try and see if he could be that person for you? That you try and attempt to talk to him about that, or was that just never an option there in the early days?
So I did. I'll try to make first contact. He actually gave me a wink in the line when we were walking down the opening scene. I look back to see who's behind me, and he's like 2 people behind me, and he gives me a little wink, and I'm like, okay, cool, we game on. We've recognized each other, we sorted. But when I first spoke to him, I got this weird vibe from him, and then I didn't get to speak to him much again until like day 2, and that's when I knew that all the stories that were surfacing about me within the tribe were definitely from him. He was trying to incite paranoia from me, so I did try connect, because I think having like that personal relationship going into the game is super super powerful. Look at how Kieran and Inesu had crossed paths. Look at how Tyson and Kieran had like some sort of a connection. Warda and Anesu, look at how, and it's working out lovely for them. It's bought them time to build relationships, you know, and I think those things are super powerful, and I wanted to use a relationship like that. Unfortunately, he didn't feel the same, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I respect his decision, you know, to play hard and try to take out a threat. But yeah, I mean, it could go either way. I was open to it. Unfortunately, he wasn't.
Okay, so that kind of explains a little bit, I guess, of the thinking going into that first immunity where you sort of word off to Paul, trying to get him to send you to Immunity Island. Can you talk us through why you felt the need to do that at that stage in your game, and also why Paul specifically? You know, I know you said you had that connection with him, but did you think that he had the social capital within that tribe to be able to get it, sort of make it happen for you?
I didn't necessarily think he had the social capital, but he did have a voice. And the reason, Paul, was that I recognized him from rowing days. We used to row against each other. Turns out he didn't remember me from a bar of soap, but I recognized him and I was like, my guy, I know exactly what school you went to. I know what year you were. And we used to race against each other. And I was like, sweet. So that's why I pointed out the necklace to him. I pointed out the necklace. I was like, cool. You know, like there's this moment. I was like, he does remember me. Okay, cool. Turns out I made that up in my head. So that's the reason why I chose Paul, is because I had that existing relationship, right? And if you're the person to, like, generally, especially in early days, when there's time for a suggestion to arise, if you put your suggestion in first, nobody wants to negate anything and say no, no, no. You know, nobody wants to be that no guy and rock a boat. So I was hoping that if you just, like, if it came up and they were like, cool, who do we send? Oh no, Dino, that it could potentially stick. I knew it was a long shot. I knew it was a hell of a long shot, but it was worth it to me because I was not integrating very well with the tribe in terms of alliances. I could feel everybody keeping me at arm's length. There's no real space for me in the shelter at night. Nobody wanted to be seen with me alone. Jason had come up to me explicitly and said, if you didn't have that necklace, you'd be the first one voted off, you know. So all of that, I'm like, stuff this, you know, if we go to tribal council tonight, and, you know, I'm safe tonight, and then we go down to the next tribal council, they don't put me on a puzzle, I don't have my fate in my own hands, and then I go home, I'm like, I'm going to kick myself for the rest of my life and say, why didn't you try harder, try something? So I don't regret doing something so bold and something that didn't work out at all. I don't regret trying that at all, because I would regret doing nothing. I'll never regret trying something.
Yeah, and I mean, it made a great TV moment, especially, you know, when you guys get back into camp and you immediately own up to the fact that that's what you did, because Sean noticed that you were doing it, and then Sean said that he wasn't gonna go and tell them. But we both know that, you know,
man. Dude, I'm going a little bit off into the. I'm venturing here, but on that platform during that challenge, Sean, I watched him go tell Jason, Anela, and Marisha. And Jason still looked me in the eye while Sean was telling him and said, it's cool, we're going to stick with the 6. And I just chuckled, put my head in my hands and just laughed and walked back, shame. So Sean had already told half the tribe during the challenge. So getting back to camp and going, hey guys, I messed up, Sean caught me, was a no-brainer because that information was out there already. And Sean denies it, but I mean, that's just, I don't blame him for denying it. I mean, he's crafty, and I know him, and we didn't click on the island, but I've got a lot of love for him and a lot of respect for him, you know, like as a person, even though we clashed a bit. But I mean, yeah, that was
great TV moment.
Being Sean.
Great TV moment.
It's cool. Yeah, no, it's super cool. I mean, super funny.
Now, I did want to ask you, when you go into episode 2, obviously, you know, you get that first vote out as Jason played the game quite hard. You guys go to the immunity, and you were seen as, I believe it was either the 3rd or 4th person to go onto the puzzle, and then ultimately you dominated. Was that because you were strategically trying not to take that responsibility on? And what was the thinking there? And how much of a target do you believe that continued to add on your back when you were already not integrated within the tribe?
It was bittersweet, right? So that was actually a reward challenge. Now, I introduced myself to the tribe early on, and everyone's like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, I own a small business. They're like, ooh, what small business? Now, originally, I wanted to be this skydiving instructor because, you know, I skydive, it's a believable story, and it's like, oh, dude, I'm just here for the adventure. And it suits my goofy personality, I think, you know, it would be believable. But I knew that, like, some people knew what I did. So they found out that I've got a live escape game. So everyone's like, oh, you're going to be our puzzle guy. I'm like, look, guys, I own a business that deals with puzzles. Doesn't mean I'm good with it, but I'm happy to step up if you want. First immunity challenge, I'm going to do this puzzle. And then out of nowhere, Amy's like, I'm good at these things. I'm going to do it, blah, blah, blah. Now I get pulled off the puzzle. And I was like, ooh, okay. And we lost. Second, the second puzzle we come across was that reward challenge that you talk about. And Teresa wants to redeem herself. And then Sean's like, oh, yeah, I've seen this one. I can do it. And I'm like, that suits me. I've seen this. It was in Kian. It's come up in Australian Survivor. I've got a system for this. But I'm like, for fishing gear, have you seen the flipping wild coast waters there? Nobody's going to catch a damn thing with that fishing gear. I didn't want to flipping out myself for fishing gear. And if there was an advantage in that fishing gear, there's no ways I'm going to get my hands anywhere near, on it before anybody else in the tribe. So I was like, no, you guys go take the fall. And then they struggled and the other tribe struggled. And eventually I was like, no, it's cool. They put me forward and I'm like, okay, cool. It's a sign. Just go do it. Win it for the tribe. And hope it gets taken as like, Dino's strong. Let's use him in the short run. Maybe it gets you to like a tribe swap. So, I mean, that was an epic moment, like smashing that puzzle, and I don't regret it. I didn't want to, but it did help. And I think the good thing that comes of it is that they put me on more puzzles going forward, at least.
Yeah, 100%. You smashed all of those. Definitely had your moment. It wasn't even close between you and the other tribe. I do want to talk towards, I guess, the next part of the game is where you end up swapping tribes and you land in this tribe with some of your former Zumba members. I believe it was 5 other Zumba members there. Teresa sort of mentions going into this that she was very aware that you, her, and Kian were on the bottom. You were in the outs. Was there ever any consideration to work with a Teresa and a Kian and sort of make something happen with the Tyson Anesu sort of fraction, almost like what we saw in I guess the new Zumba, where people like Paul and Chappies, they were in the bottom and they kind of flipped the whole script on that side. Were you considering a similar strategy on your side? And sort of why or why didn't you? And sort of what was your thoughts going into a swap, I guess?
So I really wanted to work with Teresa. I love Teresa and I love the way she views the game. We actually did click, weirdly enough, early on in original Zamba, and we had a couple of conversations, and we very quickly picked up that the other one was a super fan, and she picked that up as a bit of a threat. And by day 3, she actually openly said to me, like, you've missed your chance to work with me. And I was like, oh, that's a shame. And then we get into this tribe swap situation. I'm like, I was also quite aware on that dynamic of the me, Kian, her being on the outs. And I was like, I knew Teresa would integrate with Kieran and Tyson and Anessa, and you could see that they were like bonding. And I was like, that's the ride I want to get onto that ride. I wanted to build my own fresh alliance and get involved with players like almost on a clean slate. But unfortunately, Teresa's best play was to try and throw me under the bus and start pointing out. She's like, no, Dino's the puppet master there. He's pulling all the strings. He's the head of that alliance. That's what she was telling Kieran and them. I didn't know this at the time. So when I'm coming to Kieran and Tyson going, I'm at the bottom, you guys, I really want to work with you. They're like, what a double agent. What are you, this fool? He's like, yeah. So their perception of me was affected by Teresa's comments, and well played to her on that part, So unfortunately, although I wanted to work with her, it just didn't happen that way.
And what about Kian? Was there any opportunity to work with Kian? Where was she sitting at that point in regards to the alliances and things? Was she aware that she was outside of that, I guess, power 3 within that Zumba tribe?
She was. She also had a particularly hard time originally at Zumba. I saw that she was like ostracized, like the first four days or so. She had an incredibly tough 4 days, and I admire her for getting through it, and mostly alone. So she did feel very much in the arts, but I think she did very well to get closer to the girls when we got to Vuna 2.0. She laid very low. She just sat and did her cooking. There was no real attention on her. So although she was she was a bit of an outsider to the original alliance, because she seemingly posed no threat, she started climbing that ladder. Well, it was a very short ladder of me, Teresa, and Kian. She climbed that to the head of that ladder very, very quickly, and she would have been, above us in that ladder. So I also just didn't get the right vibes from her initially. And that's why I opted not to work with her. I just couldn't let go with her and try build trust with her, because I knew she didn't trust me, and I thought that anything I said to her would come back and hurt me. So I'm not sure how accurate that was, but that's how I felt at the time with her. And that's why I didn't try so hard at Vuna 2.0 to build a relationship with her.
Now, you're someone that when you have that first, I guess, challenge as new tribes, you point out very quickly that Paul and Tyson are talking in the challenge, and Renier sort of picks up on that as well, and then starts going off that. I think he probably picked a little bit of what you were saying up, and the fact that there was some information being transferred from Paul to Tyson. Were you guys pretty convinced early on there that Tyson got the idol? How surprised were you to see all of this play out on TV? And did you look for idols on any of the islands yourself?
So I'll answer slightly in reverse order. 100%, I looked like anywhere and everywhere. It's so hard. So South African Survivor, and if you've heard interviews with LaRue in the past, he'll tell you that they'll always place it in a logical place that, you'll need some sort of a clue and advantage to find it. It's not just randomized like the US. So it's very hard to find an idol without a clue. But I tried nonetheless. So I did look.
I love that about this, by the way, just for anybody listening, I think that's the way you should be hiding idols. I'm not a fan of putting a yellow pouch or a blue pouch in a tree for someone to get, or, it shouldn't be that easy. So obviously it makes it hard.
Not a scavenger hunt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's hard for you guys playing the game, but yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
No, I agree with you 100%. So
the rest of the question was, how surprised were you sort of with the Tyson being able to get that idol as quickly? Were you guys pretty much across it? Did you sort of have a pretty good idea that he had something after that?
I knew before Tyson stepped into that ring that was going to happen, because I saw Paul sitting next to Santini, and Paul was trying to communicate with Kian and Tyson on the bench across the sandpit. So I look at Paul, Kieran's head's up, Paul head drops. And then I look at Kian, and this drops. And that, like, funny thing is, you look at the other and you can see there's a message trying to be passed. And I turned to Kian at that moment. I said, hey, dude, listen, if you're working with Paul, and at that stage I thought, Paul still recognized me. I was like, if you're working with Paul, you're working with me, because I know the guy. I'm at the bottom, like, it's cool, whatever message you need, I'll support. I whispered this to Kian, thinking I'm getting my foot in the door with him. At the same time, I don't know how this is going to pan out, so I'm trying to, like, cover my bases with Renier, who was the person I was really trying to work with from Zamba 1.0, because I felt like he was the most influential. So when it came to the decision of who would go up against who, and Tyson steps forward, I was quite, because I'm quite vocal about things, I was quite influential in who competed where, whatever. I was like, sweet, free run, go Tyson, so you could go get that information. And I knew for a fact there was never a second down in my mind that he got the clue to the idol. We got back to the camp. I'm like, Renier, he's definitely been given a clue. We need to keep an eye on him. He disappears, boom, and we know he's got the idol. There was never any doubt in my mind that he had an idol. And that's also why I wanted to work with Kian and Tyson, because if they did use this idol, I didn't want them to use it against me, because yes, they were in the minority. I was fully prepared to feed them information as to where the votes were going, but I just didn't want to be the one to to suffer the consequence.
Now, you mentioned Renier there as somebody that you tried to work with in that Zamba tribe, or the original Zamba 1.0, I would say. How much of a surprise was it for you to find out how big of a fan that Renier was? Did you pick up on this on the show? Were you able to bond over this at all? Because it does look like Renier at this stage is playing a very subtle game and trying to hide a lot of this to the people who he's playing the game with.
Oh, dude, Renier is phenomenal. He downplayed his Survivor knowledge so well. His story was, no, my wife's a big fan. I watched it, I've entered, blah blah blah. So he was very, very clever in the way he downplayed it. He had no social online presence or footprint, whatever. He was very aware of what was going on. He's the other person that recognized me from those videos and stuff. But I didn't know any of that. I started getting an inkling when you see somebody playing so well. And there was a couple of conversations where it came up about potential challenges, where I started realizing, I was like, no, he's a much bigger fan than what he's led on. And that was a good thing for me. That was a relief, because then I'm like, okay, cool. That gives me somebody, that I can really work with, because, like, fan respect fan, you can shield each other, whatever. But no, in the beginning, he did so well to play it down. And I mean, you see it on screen. The guy was so gifted socially, and is so gifted socially, and not just because he's a great player, but because he's a great human being, yeah, I mean, I have huge admiration for the way he plays the game.
No, 100%. And sort of thinking about that stage in the game, you've got a few days there, I guess, to sort of work your magic and try and get in there, because you guys win a few immunity challenges as a tribe and everything's going pretty well. What was the game plan when you sort of saw that things weren't working for you and the Tyson and Kira and the Nesu side of things, you're not able to get in there? What was the game plan in regards to getting in on that side? I know you said that Anir was one of them. Did you try and have conversations with Nicole and Marisha, or were they very standoffish? Because early in the show, it shows that the girls kind of wanted to bring you in with Amy as well. And I don't know if that sort of translated through to the first swap tribe that you were in.
It did, and I had and have a good relationship with Marisha and Nicole in this instance, and even Kian today. But at that stage, I had a good relationship with Marisha and Nicole. They were like the cuddle buddies. I blocked the wind at night for them. We had great laughs, and there was this element that I was a part of their alliance. But yes, I was a part of their alliance, but I was well aware as to where in that alliance I was. So I did speak to them, and I did try to build a relationship, and going on that reward challenge with Marisha did a lot for our bonding as well, and it helped build a better relationship there, but I still could feel that if there was somebody that was going to take a fall, I was high up on that list to take that fall for that alliance, and I didn't want that for myself. That was just it was too risky. Weirdly enough, I'd rather shoot and show loyalty to somebody else and try to climb a ladder that was more easy to climb, because I just knew that they were just so tight. They had so much in common, and they loved being together so much. There was no ways I was working my way up any further there. I'd hit that ceiling, and that's why I was looking elsewhere. But I mean, we got on super well.
Yes. Now, you mentioned the Marisha, sort of challenge that you went out there and you guys beat Chappies and Warda in that challenge. Would you say that was probably one of your proudest, if not your proudest moment in the game? And if not, what was your proudest moment, the thing that you would look back on the most fondly playing the game?
Oh, it was an awesome moment, but I mean, let's be real. I mean, Chappies had me out-muscled, and my only regret was that Marisha didn't get to take a crack at Chappies. I think she was frothing at the mouth to have a go, and I think she would have given him a good run. It was one of the more special days. I don't want to say that challenge was a proud moment. I'll definitely say that as a whole was a very special day, and a memory that I will cherish forever. But I'd say like the highest high I experienced, and like hands down, and I think about this a lot, and I'm so lucky to have experienced this, was that second immunity challenge. We'd come from that reward, we had smashed that puzzle. I see this puzzle that I recognize as well. Have a strategy with Kian, and knowing that, you've got to build that sensor from that puzzle from the center out. And I'm like, cool, got this in my mind. And we go out the gates and we're giving it our all, and we find ourselves so far down. We were so far behind, when we got to the puzzle. And it was literally split seconds. Like, it couldn't have been more than a 10-second win that we had over the other tribe.
Wow.
That moment, like when Nico goes and Zamba think they have it, and you just sit there for what feels like an eternity, and you're like, yes, Nico, we've got it. But then you're like wondering, like, why is he looking at this thing? Like, what's wrong? And the other tribes just completed it. So you're like shivering. And then he says they do. Yes, that feeling was unreal, man. Like, I got super emotional because I felt like if we didn't win that, I was going home. I felt like we've just saved the game. To come back from so far behind was like such a cool experience. And as somebody who's got a sporting background, those are the kind of moments you live for. Yeah. So yeah, the long answer, I had to give you a big explanation as to why, but I mean, that was definitely a massive high for me.
Yeah, and it's a high for us as Survivor fans, because there's been an amount of great gifts that were sort of on the internet after you celebrating that specific win. That's going to be there for eternity now, moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's awesome, dude.
I also wanted to ask you specifically around the raid. It was quite interesting. You wanting to be the person that goes out there and goes and does the raid. The thinking behind that, because when you're playing a game like Survivor and you're taking like these items from people, I know you probably wanted to go there for the information part of it, but probably not going to be the best friend of the people that you're going to go steal their machete. And like we saw with Sean in that specific tribal council, what was the thinking behind that? And what were you able to pick up, and what was your impressions of Chappies at this point in the game as well? Because I'm reading in between the lines that a lot of people were saying that Chappies wasn't the greatest person out there, and he's trying to sort of redeem himself at the moment from what I've seen on the show. So what was the sort of dynamics? I mean, you guys learned that Paul and Chappies flip things over. Sean's being pretty antagonistic, not wanting to give you guys things. What was that like being on the island? Talk us through it.
I think there's a whole podcast in this day. It was wild, and I mean, it's, you know, the decision to go comes out of Dino's playbook of how not to win friends on the island. So it's I wanted to go for a number of reasons. You know, I felt like there's some sort of connection with Amy in particular, and I wanted to work on these things to like let them know that we want to keep them safe. I wanted to protect Amy in that I didn't want anybody else to go with this information that she had lost the challenge, and that's why we got to raid them. You know, so I wanted to protect them, get information. And again, I didn't want somebody else from Zamba to be that person, because that was only going to way strengthen bonds. And we obviously didn't want two Vuna members to go for obvious reasons as well, you know. So that's why I was happy to stick my hand up. Also, I'm just an excitable child and I want to do everything. So that played a big part, you know. And we get there, and oh my word, the hostility, I cannot explain to you how hostile that was, with, in particular, Sean, Chappies and Paul. Now, love them to bits, no issues with them, but in that moment, what it felt like was you had like King Alpha in the back there in his Speedo and Chappies and his two henchmen in front, his two like bodyguards going like, what are you doing here? What do you want? You can't have that. We don't have it. We've forgotten it, for like hours, dude. And I was so frustrated, and it was so hostile, and I just wanted to cry, you know. And eventually we have to stop and go like, no guys, we demand these items. This is it. We go through the note. And, you know, Sean steps up and I'm like, okay, Sean will protect Amy. And then he reads the whole thing and just throws Amy under the bus. I'm like, oh, dude, you're kidding me. So it was painful. It was painful. We ended up negotiating with the girls who were like cowering in the back because they were too scared to have a voice, because like the guys were running like rampant in their tribe, excluding like Canela. So it was a wild, crazy day, you know. We had actually offered, funny enough, that Sean takes so much issue with this machete thing, but anything we said, they were like, no, it can't happen. No, we don't have this. No, we don't have this. They were being like completely painful, right? And somewhere in between, you know, when we're getting the 3 items, I say to them, I said, listen, guys, there is a small paring knife that we won in the first, that advantage that Renier had at the beginning of the game. I said, you guys have an axe, a working machete, and a small paring knife. You guys broke this machete. This is why we take your machete. We will give you the other machete back if you give us this paring knife. No, you're only allowed to take 3 items. Da, da, da. I'm like, no, we've taken our 3 items. We will willingly trade this bent machete for the paring knife to make. No, you can get F, you da, 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 da. And I was like, fine.
Yeah.
Fine. And then like a couple of days later, it's like, these assholes leave us without a machete. I'm like, but you rejected it. Like, what must I do? So it's just so funny. And I think there's like, I mean, I don't blame anybody, and I have no hard feelings towards it. It was part of this fun experience. But in the game, like I look at it from their viewpoint. Somebody else is coming to your house and is coming to destroy it in their world, and anything is negative, and they've got these like hostile feelings, and the emotions like bubble over. So I can see why it got to the point it did. But again, I mean, you said to it earlier, I mean, it makes for great TV moments, at least, you know, at least it's some form of entertainment. And oh, what a cool thing to be a part of as a fan.
No, 100%. And I'm kind of interested because, you know, your season almost reminded me a little bit of Survivor Fiji, where you had the haves and have-nots, with you guys winning so many of the rewards and constantly having food and things like that. How much weight did you lose? And did you lose any weight while you were out on Survivor by the end of it? Because you guys won a lot of rewards.
Yeah, we did win a lot of rewards, but there's been a lot of comments about how mollycoddled we've been, which I'm like, it's not true. I lost 8 kilos in 16 days, and that fits what I worked out as the average is. Excuse me, man. A male castaway, I've worked out, like having looked at like previous season, loses on average about 500 grams per day that they're out there, you know.
Yeah.
And I've, even with all those rewards and stuff like that, I fell bang on that average, you know, 8 kilos, 16 days. So yeah, we were definitely the haves, they were the have-nots. You've seen those secret scenes where Chappies has caught all these flying ants, and they've got like hundreds of these flying ants, and they're trying them for protein, and I don't blame him. And I'm like, wow, you know, while we're on the other side, like oh man, just like living it up in comparison to it. So it was hard. We know how hard the conditions were, and I mean, we were struggling as the haves. We were struggling, so I can only imagine how challenging it must have been to be the have-nots in that case.
Yeah. Well, you get into a tribe swap here, right? So worst thing happens, you've just had a couple of days to try and work yourself into some sort of an alliance, or at least somewhere in the pecking order where you hopefully wouldn't have been the next person to go home, we would assume, if things played out in a normal way. And I do think that it's a great, like I kind of called it on the podcast. I said, we need another tribe swap. I didn't want it to be at your expense, but I wanted it to be an interesting sort of rest of the season, because Zumba was looking like they were running away with it, original Zumba. And you land on a tribe here with Tyson and Kiran. What was your pitch in the early days here to try and work your way in with them? And why do you believe that they chose to go against you rather than going against Kian, who you said kind of worked her way up a little bit, maybe even more than you did within the other alliance?
Yes, that's an interesting question, and I'll unpack part of it. And I suppose if it ever comes up, I mean, Kieran and Tyson would need to unpack the rest, you know.
Yeah.
I knew the swap was coming. I thought it was going to happen at the reward challenge. I'd worked it out. I said, look, I mean, first swap was two two votes in, basically 6 days in. There's definitely going to be another swap before merge. I worked out where I thought merge was going to be. And I was like, it has to be this period now, otherwise there can't be another swap. And that just didn't make sense. So I was expecting that swap. And that's part of the reason why I sent Marisha with the machete to send it to the other tribe, just in case. And yeah, it was
What
quite
was the
a
pitch?
weird one, because
Yeah.
the pitch,
Yeah, the
it
pitch to
was,
them to sort of like get yourself in there and sort of stay with them, because you mentioned that they early on didn't really, and they mentioned in the episode that you're a flip-flopper, which I found quite interesting because we didn't see that on the TV show at all.
no. So in my world, leading up to that, I'd been feeding them as much information. I didn't know that they were getting this information from other people anyway, you know, but I was giving them all the information and endearing myself to them and constantly going like, I know, Tyson, you have the idol because of X, Y, and Z. Like, it's okay. I know, and it's okay. Just like let me in here. I'm trying to build a relationship with you. And they kept closing that door, you know, and denying. And I was like, I understand why you would, and that's okay, you know. But here's the information. I want to work with you guys. So I spent a lot of time trying to work with them prior to us even having to go to a tribal council, you know. And I thought that would land well because, you know, I was genuinely trying to work with them even when there was no tribal council. Unbeknownst to me, the perception they had of me, you know, having that foot in the door with Zumba. So when we land on new Zumba, you know, Zumba 3.0, I think that all these things are still at the back of their mind, and I think they're stuck in Kieran's mind more than they're stuck in Tyson's mind. I mean, remember Tyson says to me, I do have the idol eventually, and you can put my name down. Before going into the tribal council, I'd given them the lay of where all the votes were going, and I said, Tyson, you realize that my vote's going on you? He's like, yeah. So I said, I take it that because you're okay with it, it's a good sign, and that's where we left it, you know. And in tribal, he says, hey, Dino, put your vote on me. So I thought all of those things were a good sign, and I thought, although there was resentment for the votes that built up in him, I didn't think that the resentment would be towards me because everything I did was with his consent, you know. So I didn't pitch too hard to them. All I said to them, like my big thing was like, look, guys, I'm putting my trust in you. I'm going to remain calm. I'm not going to scramble. Like, and I don't know how else to show you that that's how I trust what you're saying right now, you know. And I'm hoping that trust can return. So I suppose in short, that would have been my pitch, you know. And then I did nothing. I was too shit scared to speak to anybody else or be seen to be speaking to anybody else because I didn't want them to think that I was now scrambling and going against them and giving them a reason to vote me out. Why they think I'm a flip-flop, I think they just had a perception of how close I was to the Zumba tribe that probably wasn't as accurate. And because I said to them, look, if we're going for Santini, please can we put 2 votes on Kian, because if Santini's got an idol, I don't want to go home, you know? And they're like, oh, well, why would Dino put up another Zumba member's name? Well, I'm not going to say why did the Kieran or Tyson is the other name. The only other available name was Kian. So my options were limited. So my back was really against the wall. And I think Tyson was the one that had the issue, and he's the one that called that shot. I don't believe Kieran actually wanted to go for me at that stage. I think he saw value in working with me, but Tyson felt very, very strongly about what had happened in the past, and he carried that through. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Another thing there that was quite interesting for me was the Vuna tribe sending Anella Smash to Immunity Island. Were you kind of surprised by the fact that they didn't have your back in this situation and potentially didn't send you to Immunity Island? Or was it pretty much you knew that Smash would have been, he was Mr. Popular and he would be sent to Immunity Island?
I didn't think for a second they'd send me. It's like, do you know this guy with the big ass cross on his back, this huge target? Why would they send him to go and get an advantage? There was no ways. I had more hope of being sent by Paul in day an Immunity Challenge 1 than I had at that challenge of being sent,
Yeah. But
So
I mean, it
I
would have been a good game move. I mean, again, I'm armchair coach here, sitting nice and comfortable. Would have been a good move by someone like a need to keep a bigger target, potentially going in there to the merge in front of him. In the game, someone that we knew was probably going to still be a target, even if they made the merge. But again, I guess the dynamics between Smash and Amy and Renier, that's something that I'm not too aware of.
So yeah, I speculate now, and you'd have to speak to Renier about this. Like, Smash was a sitting duck, and he was one of Renier's closest allies, far closer than what I was to Renier at that stage, right? So it was a no-brainer for him to send Smash. And at the same time, Renier was well aware that I was trying to work with Kian and Tyson. So Renier still thought that I had a better chance at survival on my own. So it's like, leave me to my own devices. I can still maybe make of it. But I mean, even if it was cut and dry that if they send Anela, I go home, or if they send me and Anela goes home, if it was as clear as day and they were presented with that, Anela was always going to be saved, So yeah, I mean, if there was a part of me that thought that perhaps they might send somebody like Kian, because Kian represented a portion of the original Vuna, and he was well liked by everybody. His social game's incredible, and from like a original Zamba perspective, it kept me, Kian, Anela together, along with Santini, who Anela was working with, who would keep us in the majority. So there was this in the back of my mind that they could potentially send a Kian, keep Kian safe, somebody they trust to get something at Immunity Island that they could trust might come back with it, and keep some of their former Zamba in the majority. So that was my only real outside hope, if that answers your question.
No, it does. So the other question I like to ask people is, like, now that you've played the game and you're watching the show, like, who's surprised you the most since you've watched the TV show? Who do you think actually played a bigger game than what you were potentially aware of, or you're just surprised to see it play out on TV?
So I didn't get to play the game with Carla, and I have huge admiration and respect for the way she played the game. I think she's absolutely phenomenal. Like, I think she's a great player, and she breaks any type of stereotypes, right? And I was privileged to meet her in Ponderosa, so she was like my emotional support when I got evicted. So I've got an attachment there. But so it was great to watch her game play out, and I was super proud of seeing that. Santini as well. I mean, Santini goes into the game with a different set of tools to what most people out there had. A lot of people were like super incredibly athletic. Santini falls on the more eccentric side of things. She's got a quirky personality. This bright shirt. And she goes in with this very different set of tools, and she's like masterfully, like, her strategy of picking one from here, break that pair up. I'm like, it's brilliant. That has been so cool to watch, and I'm so proud of her and so excited for her. And I'm so excited to watch the rest of her game unfold, because I love that. People that aren't surprising me, it was a privilege to watch their game play out in front of me, and it's a privilege to watch it on TV. Is people like Renier and Kian and Anesu. Those if I had to highlight just a select few, like that to me was like wild. But really, like, everybody, like Amy, I mean, geez, I love her to bits, and she's amazing, and she's done an amazing job socially, as she's just so likable and so lovable, and she's so genuine. Tyson's the youngest castaway out there, but although, I mean, I'd feel aggrieved and feel like his emotions got the better of him on the Teresa vote and on my vote, like, he's still playing like a really, really good game, and he's the youngest out there, and he's not a fan of the game, so I'm like, it's super cool to see that as well. I mean, I could actually give you a reason for every single castaway. I love the cast. I really, really do. And yeah.
No, it definitely comes through. And I mean, I've been amazed by the level of gameplay from the female players. Not that the guys haven't been playing well, but I just feel like there's so many good female players this season. And you mentioned a few of them there. Anessa was my preseason favorite to win the game. And I've felt that she's been doing me proud so far, playing a really good game. And then Amy, I've just been absolutely amazed by in the last 3 episodes, in the way that she's playing the game and how under the radar she's been able to be, and people are just not picking up on that at this stage in the game. You mentioned there that you got to meet Carla at Ponderosa. It's the first time I've heard that. I don't know if you can talk to that a little bit. What was the Ponderosa experience like, and how long was it everybody that was pre-merge, or was it just a few select people that potentially hanged out there for a little bit?
So traditionally, Survivor South Africa is not like Survivor US or Oz, where there's a pre-jury trip, right? So we don't have that. And traditionally, they would send castaways home 2 days after they get voted out. This season they did it very differently, and I'm super grateful to it. They kept people for a period of time, a cooling down period, and once they felt that they were psychologically ready to return, they'd book the ticket, send them home. So there was a lot of overlapping with the people that have left the game so far. There was a lot of overlapping, right? By the time I got there, it was only Carla. She was spending a couple of days to cool down. Teresa had gone home. Everybody else had gone home. I'm not sure who she overlapped with. So I got to spend 3 days there with her, and I'm so grateful for it. And I hope it's something that they keep doing in seasons to come, because to come out of the game and to face somebody who's had the similar experience to you and is facing similar disappointments, who's had this ride, who can kind of identify, it becomes a bit of a pity party, misery loves company kind of thing. You crack jokes, you have banter. It made the world of difference. You don't feel like alone, and you don't feel as silly. And so yeah, I really cherish the time I spent there with Carla. And I thank her for it, and I thank production for it, because it was really great. Because by the time I was ready to go home, I was completely at peace, in a really good space, and at ease, and ready to take life on again.
For me, Survivor, it's so much harder to win now compared to when Richard Hatch won it back in the day, or because you needed 1 or 2 players that knew what they were doing and they would run the whole show. But now you're going up there against people who all have seen the show to a certain degree, and they've seen the game evolve, and everybody's got their own plan. So I could very easily see someone like myself dropping out first. Like I said this to Jason, who I think was a big fan when I spoke to him in number 1 spot. He could, in another season, he could have gone deep. It's one of those things. It's what makes us love the show of Survivor. And I think that, as a fan who went there to play the game, I know you would appreciate the fact that you were out there in the first place and you gave it a good crack. And I do want to thank you for your time on the show and putting on a showcase for us and forming part of this great cast for Survivor Immunity, South Africa Immunity Island. It's been one of the most spoken about Survivor South Africa seasons ever. We get over 70% of our listeners. I would have thought most of them would be New Zealanders or Australian. Over 70% of them are from the US. And there's a massive following for people that are watching it from the US and that are loving this season. And I constantly get questions asked, like someone from Pakistan messaged me the other day saying, how can I watch Survivor South Africa? So I've said this a few times. Mnet needs to figure out how they're going to put this out there for other countries as well to watch it. I think it's a great show, and you form part of a great cast. Now, before I let you go here, I'd love to ask this question. If you had to pinpoint one specific thing in the game that you think you could have done differently to get further, what would that be? And then secondly, if you were asked to come back for a second chance season, or maybe go in there with a blood versus water or something like that, would you say yes? And what type of theme would you love to play in?
So, I suppose if there was a Survivor pity party, I'd be one of the first names on the sheet. So I am realistic about my chances of returning. I do understand that there's a lot of Survivor talents out there. So I am realistic about what my odds are. But if that opportunity arose, I would absolutely take it with both hands in any way, shape, or form. I'd love to return. The game is amazing, but at the same time, I'm super grateful for the journey that I've had. I think there was a question just before that. Oh, pinpoint one thing.
Yes.
Yeah, if I was to pinpoint something, there's a couple of things. If I nitpick, I can tear apart my game. You can tear apart any game if you nitpick. But I think the overwhelming sense was that, by nature, I'm generally not a paranoid person. I'm pretty chilled, laid back, goofy, have fun. I think the circumstance got the better of me, and I think had I been equally savvy and equally aware, but without showing that paranoia and nervous energy, I think it would have done a lot more to build trust amongst people, and I wouldn't have struggled to get into alliances as much as I did. So I definitely say that the paranoia was a part, not just from a bad decision-making point of view, but from a relatability point of view, it kind of put people off me, so yeah.
Well, Dino, I'm grateful that we had technical issues in the beginning of the show, because I got a little bit of an extended sort of interview here with you, which I really appreciate. And I look forward to staying in touch and talking a bit more Survivor with you in the future. And who knows, we might see you on here one day to talk about another season. So, if you're ever open to doing a bit of a recap, it's a lot harder than what you think, so come on here and jump on and talk about it. Actually, it's probably not too bad for the guests. There's a bit of preparation and actually going into a podcast when you're preparing for it, if you're sort of hosting it. But it's been great talking to you, and we'll definitely stay in touch. If you got to this point of the interview, please hit subscribe. We're heading closer to 900 subscribers now. We're still targeting that 1,000 subscriber mark, which is our first milestone, with something big coming. I don't know what it is yet. Maybe we'll be doing an org. I don't know if I want to play in an org now, just having spoken to Dino about his own experience and having a target going into the game. But
they're awesome, man. They're awesome. You got to do it.
No, 100%. So we'll do something big if we get to 1,000, that's for sure. And hit a like, put a comment in there, and let us know what you think of the show. Thanks, guys.